Outlaws of Thunder Junction is almost completely spoiled, so let's talk about the new mechanics, some sweet new cards, some friendly old faces, and what that'll mean for Commander. Let's start with some of the most recently spoiled cards before diving a little deeper into spells plus mechanics. Wily Duke, a teen hero, will gain you a life and draw you a card whenever he becomes tapped. You need to be a little creative though, because he'll make you work for it on account of having vigilance. Campbell Profiting Mayor will make you copy tapped tokens identical to the tokens that an opponent has enter the battlefield under their control. On top of that, he'll drain your opponent's 1 life for each instance of 1 or more tokens entering the battlefield under your control. This is a fun new take on the aristocrat playstyle, and if you want to build him, definitely bring a Forbidden Orchard. Annie Joins Up is another in the series of Legends Matter enchantments. This will deal 5 damage to a target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls when entering the battlefield. Then it will double the triggered abilities of every legendary creature you control. Goldvein Hydra has the classic X casting cost associated with the +1/+1 counters that the creature will enter the battlefield with. Tack on this roster of keywords: Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. Then, when it dies, you get to make tapped treasure tokens equal to its power. This can set you up early game to start pulling away, and then late game could give you the resources to finish off the whole table. Akul the Unrepentant is a 5/5 flying trampler that lets you sacrifice 3 other creatures to put a creature from your hand onto the battlefield once per turn at sorcery speed. This has that Rakdos flavor with some unseen green spilling into this color pair. In any case, this should make for a fun build that needs to balance out sacrifice fodder and some huge heavy hitters. Sandstorm Verge is a desert land that taps for a colorless mana, or to spend 3 mana to make a target creature unable to block for the turn. I'd much prefer a target creature be made unblockable for the turn, but this does give additional upside for Desert Tutors we'll talk about later in the video. Full Steam Ahead is the newest overrun effect, granting each creature you control +2/+2 and trample until the end of the turn. That's not all that good for 5 mana, but the additional condition that each creature can't be blocked by more than 1 creature makes this more interesting. Claim Jumper is the newest white ramp spell, letting you search for a plains card to put onto the battlefield tapped twice. The first time you can do it is when the creature ETBs and an opponent controls more lands than you do. If an opponent still has more lands, you can do it again. There's an argument that Boombox is the best colorless removal spell printed in years. It costs 2 mana to cast and 6 mana to tap and sacrifice. When you do, you get to destroy 1 target artifact, 1 target creature, and 1 target land. A boombox can change the world. You gotta know your limits with a boombox. Last one for this preamble is Obika, Splitter of Seconds. She is a 4 mana Grixis creature with Menace that will give you additional upkeep steps, equal to the combat damage she deals to a player, right after the phase that combat damage is dealt. She only starts with 2 power, but if you're able to boost that total and punch through after casting something like Court of Cunning, you could possibly win the game right there and then. Plot is my favorite new mechanic, and I suspect some of the spells will be among the most impactful in the Commander space. It's an alternate cost for a spell that will exile it face up, letting you cast it for free on a later turn at sorcery speed. Outcaster Trailblazer is going to be awesome for green stompy players, letting you draw a card when another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control. It'll also add a mana of any color on ETB. Playing this on turn 3 runs the risk of it getting removed. Might as well plot it, cast it for free the following turn, get that extra mana, get a big girl down, and draw your well-deserved card. Tangent incoming. Bonnie Paul, Clearcutter, is gonna be a beast entering with her pet ox bow that will scale in power based on how many lands you control. Then you can draw a card and put a land from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield whenever you attack. If you've been looking for a Simic commander, this very well could be your gal. Rise of the Varmints is a fun Graveyard Matters card, creating as many varmints as you have creatures in your graveyard. Step Between Worlds is a new draw 7 spell, which is fairly unique as each player may draw those 7 rather than must draw those 7. In any case, you can plot this spell to really pop off on a future turn. Railway Brawler has plot, and it is cheaper than the casting cost. But again, for all you green stompy enjoyers out there, this creature doubles the power of every creature that enters the battlefield under your control through +1/+1 counters. Lone Shark is a super good meme. Cunning Coyote can give something else haste, but it's also a good meme in combination with the Resilient Roadrunner, which hilariously has protection from coyotes. Beyond the actual plot creatures, there are plot payoffs or plot adjacent spells. You get it. Doc Orlock, Grizzled Genius, makes plotting cards cost 2 less mana. Also makes spells you cast from your graveyard or exile cost 2 less as well. With 3 toughness and only costing 2 mana, he might be something of a rock star in these strategies. Kellen Joins Up is gonna be sexy in a Legends Matter deck, letting you plot a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand on ETB, but then gives every creature you control a +1/+1 counter every time a legendary creature ETBs under your control. Since we're talking about Kellen, his final stop is Thunder Junction, where he took up the very original moniker of The Kid. He's got a solid payoff, paying homage to his adventures of the past, but also this new plot mechanic. Cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, and you may put a permanent spell of equal or less mana from your hand onto the battlefield. If you don't, you can put a land card on the battlefield. Turns out I'm a big fan of free spells or lands, so I'm officially into this version of the Kid. Though it does seem that sometime in between Ravnica and Thunder Junction, he made his way to High Charity to get an energy sword. Fibblethip Lost on the Range got spoiled a while ago, but gives the top card of your library plot and lets you plot it. Every reference to plot I've seen so far says cast, so I don't believe you'll be able to plot your lands from the top of your library. Make Your Own Luck is a 5 mana draw 3, first of all, but you also get to plot one of those cards for free. If you're doing top deck matter stuff, this is looking really cool, but even if you're not, it's still really good. Last one for this mechanic will be Aven Interrupter that has flash and will exile a target spell and plot it. It doesn't get rid of the problem for good, but it does stall it for a turn. The best use case would be against counter spells, because plotted spells have to be cast at sorcery speed, leaving that counter useless for the rest of the game. It's also a little stacksy, making spells cast from exile and graveyards cost 2 more to cast. The next mechanic is Spree, which is a brand new kind of way to do modal spells. I've talked before about how Prismari Command is one of my favorite spells, so I am a fan of this kind of spell, and it's looking like this new development is gonna be pretty cool. It has a flat, usually cheap mana cost that actually does nothing unless you pay for any number of the options the spell has below. The instant Smuggler's Surprise might be showing up in your games, costing 1 green. For 2 mana on top of it, you can mill 4 cards and put 2 creatures or lands from the milled cards into your hand. For 4 and a green, you can put up to 2 creatures from your hand onto the battlefield. That's a juicy one. And then for 1 mana, creatures you control with power 4 or greater gain hexproof and indestructible until the end of the turn. Also pretty juicy. To reiterate, you can cast this for 1 and a green to do the indestructible thing, or you can cast it for 7 and 2 green to pick every option. Final Showdown is an instant that can make all creatures lose abilities until the end of the turn, make a single creature you control indestructible, and destroy all creatures.
If you choose the first 2 options, your creature does get the indestructible. A possibly one-sided instant speed board wipe with even more upside is a very spooky prospect.
Lively Dirge is a 3 mana library to graveyard tutor, which is pretty cool, but also lets you reanimate up to 2 creatures with a total mana value of 4 or less. Shifting Grift is pure chaos, which I love, letting you exchange control of 2 target creatures, artifacts, and or enchantments. Last one for Spree is Great Train Heist, which will let you have another combat phase, but only if you cast it during your combat phase. It can also give your creatures +1 power and first strike until the end of the turn, and or pile up treasure tokens when dealing combat damage to a target opponent. Okay, I half lied to you. Riku of Many Paths has got to be mentioned here as a #modal king. He costs a teamer and lets you choose as many of his abilities as you chose on the modal spell you cast. First one is an impulsive card draw, second one is a +1/+1 counter and trample until the end of the turn, and the final option is making a 1/1 bird. Let's derail for a second. Get it? It's a train joke. To talk about some of the best reprints you can look forward to. Archangel of Tides, the 1 and 3 white angel that is a tax machine, depending on whether she's untapped or attacking. Terror of the Peaks is also coming back, which is as horrifying as it is exciting. Targeting it, or committing a crime, spoiler alert, will cost your opponent 3 life. But the sauce is the damage to any target clause down below. That damage will be equal to the power of the creature that ETB'd under your control. Last one is the cycle of enemy fast lands. Concealed Courtyard, Spire Bluff Canal, Blooming Marsh, Inspiring Vantage, and Botanical Sanctum. I just spoiled it, so let's talk crime. Targeting opponents, anything they control, and or cards in their graveyard, that is. I like to see interactions in my game, so I'm kinda pumped for this extra little incentive to be thrown into the mix. Magda is back as the Horde Master, creating a tapped treasure token whenever you commit a crime. Also, she lets you sack 3 treasures to create a 4/4 red Scorpion Dragon creature token with flying and haste. You can only do this at sorcery speed, but the Scorpion Dragon has haste, so I'm okay with it. Also, I really want to see what that token is going to look like. Marchesa, Dealer of Death, I guess decided to stop ruling Fiora for a while. Anyway, you can pay 1 after committing a crime to look at the top 2 cards of your library, putting 1 in your hand and 1 in the graveyard. Servant of the Stinger is a roundabout way to tutor any card from your library into your hand. Step 1, commit a crime. Step 2, deal damage to a player with that creature. Step 3, sacrifice that creature. And Step 4, profit. Last one here is Free Strider Lookout that rewards you for committing a crime by letting you look at the top 5 cards in your library to put a land from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Next up is the mount and saddle mechanic, which is a spin on vehicles, where the mount is a creature type, letting you saddle it the same way you would crew a vehicle. There's some nice stuff you can do with these, but I have a hard time believing they'll make any meaningful waves in the commander space, besides the Gitrog Ravenous Ride. Haste and Trample is pretty great, with a very small saddle cost of 1. When it deals damage to a player, you can sacrifice a creature that saddled it, drawing cards and putting lands from your hand onto the battlefield tapped equal to the sacrificed creature's power. The Gitrog monster is always a good time, and I imagine this will be a favorite among brewmasters everywhere. Other than him, Fortune Loyal Steed has a similarly small saddle cost. After having been saddled and attacks are completed, the mount and one of the creatures that saddled him will blink. Fortune has a Scry 2 on ETB ability, so that'll be some value right there. Stubborn Burrow Fiend has Saddle 2, and despite only being a 2/2 creature, gains power and toughness equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard after being saddled. It doesn't have any evasiveness,
so as a standalone it'll mostly be a threatening mill support piece when saddled.
But strap some flying shoes on it or something and now we're talking. Ain't nobody wanna see flying badgers, I can tell you that much, for sure. Now we're at Outlaws, which is a category of a number of different creature types. Assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, and warlocks. Caught in the Crossfire is an instant spree spell that either deals 2 damage to each outlaw creature or each non-outlaw creature. Rakish Crew opens the door for these outlaws to become aristocrats, making each opponent lose 1 life and gaining you 1 life whenever an outlaw you control dies. At knife point gives all your outlaws first strike on your turn, which could turn out to be pretty handy. It also rewards you for committing crimes by creating a new 1/1 mercenary that can tap to share some power. Shoot the Sheriff is the newest 2-mana destroy a target creature spell. Go for the Throat can't target artifacts, which is kind of a bummer. The downside of Shoot the Sheriff is that it can't target outlaws. You're gonna be doomed sometimes if you happen to be at a table of rowdy outlaw players, but tossing this into your deck if you happen to pull one or want to be flavorful will work out well most of the time. Then we've got Double Down, which is a banger enchantment, copying every outlaw spell you cast. Play one or all of those types. Stay away from legendary creatures when you can, and go buck wild on the table. The last new thing are deserts, which are a new kind of land. There are the tapped dual ping lands that will deal damage to a target opponent when they ETB. There are all 10 possibilities, but I don't feel like naming them to be honest, but they're on the screen, so you can pause if you want to. Then there is the Arid Archway, which enters tapped and bounces a land, but taps for 2 colorless mana. A couple notable spells that work well with these specific lands are Outcaster Greenblade and Map the Frontier. If you want to lean heavy into deserts, the Greenblade can get you one from your library into your hand. It'll also gain power and toughness based on how many deserts you control. Map the Frontier is less limited, costing 3 into green to find 2 basic lands or 2 deserts in your library to put onto the battlefield tapped. The deserts already enter tapped and can tap for 2 colors. In decks that want to ramp heavily, introducing these pieces can help you out in a major way. That's all the mechanic stuff, at least the stuff that I took a look at, but there's more cards to talk about, so let's do it rapid fire. Roxanne Starfall Savant will make a tapped meteorite artifact whenever she ETBs or attacks. The meteorite will deal 2 damage to any target and can tap to make any color of mana. Roxanne also makes artifact tokens tap for an additional mana. Get some token multipliers with her and make it rain, baby. Vraska Joins Up is only a Golgari and gives every creature you control a Death Touch counter. The static effect will let you draw a card whenever a legendary creature you control deals combat damage to a player. This is another Legends Matter winner and has some serious upside for only 2 mana. Holy Cow and Bovine Intervention are incredible memes from this set. I like puns, what can I say? Speaking of cows, Bruce Tarl, Roving Rancher, is also here and is a friend to oxen, giving them double strike. He offers conditional impulsive card draw when he ETBs or attacks. I say conditional because if you exile a land, the land is gone for good, but as a trade you get a 2/2 Ox creature token. Otherwise you can cast the spell until the end of the turn. Bristly Bill, Spine Sower, has a landfall trigger, giving a +1/+1 counter to a target creature. That second ability will then double the amount of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. You can even do it more than once in a turn. Vraska the Silencer's brutal ability lets you pay 1 mana to return a dying, non-token creature an opponent controlled to the battlefield tapped and under your control. It'll return as a treasure artifact and will lose all other card types. That doesn't say lose abilities, so think of the nastiest ones you can, and the answer is yes. You can have them all. Ariette the Beguiler makes up for the last Ariette's weakness, which was not having blue. Now you can cast Asinine Antics, rack up some serious damage with the old Ariette, and then steal all the token creatures from your opponents with the new one. Alright, that's enough from me. Thank you for tuning in, folks. Remember to subscribe to the channel for Commander content like this, like the video if you liked the video, and I'll catch you next time for some more monkeying around.